Another week, another gaming trend podcast. David, I like the golf claps. There you go. Unfortunately, Noah can't be here this week. He's sick. He's sick of his audio issues that he's having. Yep. Dear Lord, it is rough for him. Yep. So, Jack, you're here again.
Yeah, once again, you can't get rid of me.
Thank you for filling in the third chair. We don't want to get rid of you, Jack. So glad you were here last second to join us. That deserves the victory. Yes, I know. The only time you get praise in life is when you're on this podcast, if you don't know already. So I'm trying to get you to be on the podcast. If you catch
Okay. All right. Well, keep playing victory noises and having applause every time I talk. That would be good.
I got you. So it's taken the internet by storm. Everyone's talking about it. Even the BBC wants to talk about it. It's Palworld. Pokemon with guns. I've played very little of it, but what I've played, I didn't like it so far. Now, I was playing on Xbox, which apparently is the worst version. What I should have done before I prepped for this podcast was upload the audio of Palworld that I heard. I actually still could. I do have it, but I mean, it is bad. Like
how?
I'm an audio snob, but I can put up with some, decent audio. This is like the entire game sounds like you're underwater and with static with it, like very kind of white noise along with it, like from the title screen.
I've had some of those, yeah.
Yeah, if you're playing on Xbox, I don't know if everybody's dealing with that issue, but I am, and I couldn't take it. So there's a part of me that kind of wants to buy it on PC just to see that version, because apparently that one is the one that a lot of people are having some good times with. David, you played a little bit of it, right?
Yes, yeah, I did. Just again, like you, very minor amount of time with it. I've never been like into the survival kind of whole idea, but messing around with it for a second, I totally understand why it's blowing up, just in the sake of, well, you get the same kind of people on Minecraft that spend hours upon hours upon hours in the world, and you have a ton of people who love playing Pokemon style games. You combine both of those and give people guns? Like, I mean, that's hitting all the notes of games that are have longevity.
I feel like the guns have been overplayed. I heard there's not really a lot of them, and
which I don't think that's necessarily the real reason.
No, but they certainly highlighted that for shock factor.
Yeah, I remember watching the initial trailer for this thing like years ago, and it was the funniest thing ever because you didn't expect it, right? They're showing this like Pokemon stuff. Obviously, it's like, well, we'll talk about it, I guess, but obviously it's like a ripoff of Pokemon.
Yeah.
And then they like pull out guns and start using like Pokemon as like cover for the bullets, and like he's soaking up all the bullets.
Pokemon get guns, and then
they toss away the Pokemon and use them for like slave labor. It's like the most this like craziest shock value thing ever, and it didn't look like a real game at all. It looked like this was just to make people laugh or something. Yeah. And now it's like 2 or 3 years later, and I guess it's out, and it's like selling a bajillion copies. It's kind of like a nightmare you can't wake up from.
Yeah,
I remember them showing it off at Summer Game Fest, and I'm sitting there, I was like, okay, this is cute. This is obviously a ripoff. Oh my gosh, there's a gun. That's how it was watching that trailer.
Yeah, apparently it sold 7 million in 5 days, I think.
I think they're up to 8 million in 6.
Oh my gosh. So that's more than a million a day.
Went to 9 million now. Now it's 10 million.
Right now, at this moment, there are 1,150,491 people playing it on Steam right as of this moment.
Yeah, it's been insane amount.
Crazy enough, it has a 92.6% positive rate in the reviews.
On Metacritic?
Or on Steam.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I think it's mostly positive on Steam. You can look that up, David. But
For reference, our favorite game, Redfall, has 26 people in game.
There you go.
Catching up.
Slowly but surely, every player counts. Yeah, I think it beat out Counter-Strike for most players
Which
concurrently
is not
playing.
easy to do.
No, it's held that forever. And we're talking about Counter-Strike, you know?
Yep, it's sitting above it right now. Like I'm looking at it, the most played right now. Palworld is up top. Counter-Strike has under 500,000, and Counter-Strike peaked under 1 million, whereas the 24-hour peak for Palworld was almost 2 million. It actually has broken 2 million, which is just insane.
So it's clearly riding the wave, but I mean, for it to think about that, the number 2 game played ever is Palworld.
Yep. Only behind PUBG, which just hit at the perfect time. And got 3 million.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to beat that, but
I won't put anything. I won't put anything out just because we're not even at the weekend and they broke 2 million. You never know.
What I want to know is what were the numbers for Fortnite at its height? You know, we didn't have that because it wasn't on Steam.
Yeah, because it was Epic, right?
But Fortnite, I mean, reached people who don't even play video games, right? So I'm curious to know, just in comparison, just to see how big Palworld is, because I still feel like Palworld is still segmented within video games. Like, it's big for video games, but it hasn't reached outside of that. If we get a Ariana Grande pal, then we're starting to understand, okay, this is reaching out beyond
I don't think that'll happen.
Neither do I. Especially if she's going to get shot at with guns. So,
well, admittedly, Nicki Minaj is getting shot at in Call of Duty. So,
or any of them get enslaved. That also would not fly with their press people. So, is this a fad? Do you think Palworld has staying power, Jack?
I don't know. I think it's going to sell a bajillion ridiculous amount of copies, and there's going to be people who are into it. But I don't really see it being like one of those, you know, it's not going to be like real Pokemon. It's not going to be one of those things where people are talking about it years from now and doing all this stuff. I think this will be a popular game this year, and then, you know, it'll be kind of like the Fall Guys game or stuff like that, where it's popular for a while and it's still modestly, like, people still play it, but I don't think it's going to be like a cultural phenomenon where you have celebrities and stuff and like everyone's talking about Palworld, right? I mean,
I don't think it'd be that
a little too goofy for that, I think, but it's definitely going to be unusually big, and I think it's going to be something people will be talking about this year for sure.
I think it'll actually maintain a decent amount of people. I don't think it's going to maintain its current run by any means, but I think it'll stay stronger than we think it will, especially if the roadmap that they have put out, like if they keep supporting the game, that's really the key to it. Do you keep supporting, like, people keep going back to Minecraft even when they're not being humongous updates, but there are updates. So with Palworld, if they keep updating the game, keep putting new pals and keep doing these different things, like PvP is supposed to be coming at some point. All these different things. I think a new island. I believe there's even, it might be just an Xbox thing, and there's have it on PC. I don't remember, but there might be. I don't remember if it's 32 players on Steam or not. Like,
there are, you can play with 32 people already on Steam. Xbox does not have that. It's only up to 4.
Is 4. Yeah. So I mean, you get some of those bigger features, especially console wise. This thing can have a decent life and a decent player base. It just isn't going to be the 1 million every night kind of people playing it, but it can definitely carve out its own niche because people like it. People like what they're doing, and it's doing something that is similar while at the same time is combining a lot of things people like.
Yeah, I wonder if a lot of people have their disdain for Pokemon right now, but I wonder if Nintendo announces the next set of Pokemon, like, what's the reaction going to be? are the, if Nintendo pulls off the hype and all that stuff, right? Like, is it going to pull the same numbers, or is it going to dip because something like Palworld has finally been the thing that starts to eat into its lunch instead of Pokemon kind of killing itself?
Nintendo fans will buy things anyway all the time. They'll complain about it and then go buy it half the time. But you're going to have the biggest thing you're going to have is there's going to be that if the next Pokemon does not hit the same level, so to speak, let's just put it that way, of what Palworld at least is conceived to be at this point, because it's not necessarily what it is. Because it's the biggest thing is Palworld is not a Pokemon game. It has Pokemon elements.
Yeah.
It's not a Pokemon. It's a survival game first.
I didn't know that going into it. I thought it was an adventure game with Pokemon and, open world kind of thing, quests and all that. I load into it and the immediate thing I'm doing is having to craft and find things. I'm like, oh, frick, this is a survival game. I did not realize that. So maybe that fact didn't help me. I'm not like big into survival anyway.
Yeah,
I'll play them.
Neither.
Yeah, I'll play them. I'll always give it a chance. It's not like RTS where it's just like so far out of reach for me. But
it's just the perception, because it obviously has that prettier look that it's when you look at it, it's kind of the look of it is what you imagine a next gen Pokemon game should look like, and you can play it with your friends. That's where it's those features that Pokemon fans have wanted. Not necessarily the game specifically that they have wanted. It's the feature sets they've wanted that are in this game that is that has a lot to it that is Pokemon oriented, and that's what they're seeing. So that the comparisons are going to be more what sits there, where they've got to look at what they're doing and be like, hey, do we want to change the formula up a little bit? Because I know Jack was part of our review team. They didn't really hit the mark in the last Pokemon game in Scarlet and Violet.
It's complicated because I think the next Pokemon is kind of risky for them anyway, because when they do the next gen, it's going to be on the Switch 2 or whatever. So it's not going to have the same install base as like the regular Switches. So they're going to be like automatically 10 billion copies for that next one. But it's the way I see Palworld, it's kind of like, how there's Minecraft, and then they had like a bunch of like similar but not quite the same games like Terraria. That was a really popular one. That's still popular, I think. And this is kind of like that, where Terraria isn't Minecraft, but they're similar and they kind of do different things. And so I don't think it's going to like eat Pokemon's lunch necessarily. I think Pokemon, it fills a void though, like David was saying. It looks visually like what you'd want from Pokemon, and it doesn't run at like sub 10 frames per second. So it's like, it's because, I just played that Pokemon DLC for the Pokemon like a month ago, and somehow it's like in worse shape than the main game is. And it's not, they got to get their act together. And I think though, it's not necessarily about taking things away from Pokemon so much as it is like, it's creating almost like an opportunity for more people to be successful, where they can temporarily capitalize on this, and then whatever they do with the next Pokemon is still going to sell 1 billion, but it's going to leave people dissatisfied in other ways. And so someone else can capitalize on that. And I feel like that's something that Nintendo almost kind of lets happen these days. Like same thing for Zelda, they're doing the Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom kind of style games, and they're not doing like a normal type of Zelda game anymore. And I think that's like an opportunity for someone to be like, we're going to do a 3D Zelda game, and it'll probably do well because people want that. And it's not the same as a Breath of the Wild.
Which that is something that is funny about Palworld, is there's also some Breath of the Wildish elements to it.
Oh, it's like everything. I look at that, it's like a total mishmash of everything that's popular in the past 5 years. But
that's been one of the criticisms about Palworld, is that it seems to rip off of a lot of different things and doesn't have its own identity.
Yeah.
And it's so much so that a lot of people think that the PALs are just straight up mostly copies of Pokemon.
Well, I remember in the first trailer, there's like a trainer who looks exactly like a trainer from the Pokemon, like the recent Pokemon games of that time, like 2 or 3 years ago, except they like changed the color of her skin. And it's like, that's not a different character. It's just, you just changed the color of the skin.
Yeah, a lot of people.
It's pretty blatant.
It is. I mean, you look at the little the character, the PAL that has the minigun most of the time, and it just looks like Electabuzz, like some version of that. And there's so many PALs I look at, and I'm like, well, that looks like that Pokemon. Like the references are immediate. I don't feel like when I look at the PALs, I'm looking at something exclusively from Palworld. I feel like I'm looking at something that's been ripped off from Pokemon.
You can copy me, but don't make it obvious.
Yeah, and it feels like the reference is really close.
I feel like they have to be in the legalese of we have changed it just enough to because you got to feel like Nintendo would have shut this down a long time ago if they had an actual leg to stand on.
And they released that Pokemon mod for it yesterday, and they immediately shut that down. So that tells me they're not looking at seriously taking down Palworld. They would if they could, but they're not gonna.
Yeah, it's the again like you have that music, the cover of a music song, and they change specific notes.
Yeah.
So that it's they get away with it because it's not the exact composition.
Yep.
And that's what it is.
Version just uses synths and is in a different octave.
Yep, that's what's happening in Palworld. It's just enough has changed to be like this isn't the same creature. The
Not
legal
jukebox, I meant karaoke.
Yeah, the legal idea of it being just enough.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of interesting.
Heck, they probably went to their lawyers like, "Hey, what do we need to change?"
Well, I guess as a nothing I say constitutes legal advice, so I gotta clarify that. But
Jack is a lawyer in case you didn't know.
The way I see it is it kind of gets more interesting the more money they make and the more ridiculous their sales get. Because at that point, you kind of wonder if maybe they'd shoot out a lawsuit anyway and try to get some kind of settlement money out of them. Because that's how a lot of this stuff works, right? Most cases don't actually go to trial. Right. That's so ridiculously expensive to do. But sometimes you can get out of court settlements and just be like, give everyone a little money and then we're all good and just move on from there. And so I kind of wonder if it gets where they're making so much money where Nintendo's like, well, we want a little cut of that. But
well, you got to think that the people at Palworld knew what they were doing, so they know legally where they stand in terms of how to keep from having to do something like that. At least that would be my idea.
I guess I should have done more research, but I don't know a whole lot about this company. These are just a small team, right?
They're 10 developers.
Yeah. So I guess I don't know how legally
they've made one other game. One other game that is still in early access called Craftopia. It has not come out of early access. And
that's their Minecraft ripoff.
Sounds like it. And from what I've heard, there are a lot of ripoff elements in Craftopia. So their plan, Pocket Pair is the developer. Their plan is to release Palworld out of early access next year. They haven't even finished Craftopia out of early access. I don't know if...
Let's all be honest. Craftopia is dead.
Sure.
Palworld is the focus at this point. Craftopia is dead.
That's fair.
You don't have something sell like this and be like, oh, let's go back to our old game, which has been in early access for 4 years.
But at some point, it was their focus, and they never took it out of early access.
Well, the whole early access thing is kind of weird, too, right? How much incentive do most developers really have to take things out of early access? It's because it's kind of like a shield. Technically, the game's not done, so you can't criticize it in certain ways, right?
There are actually there are more games I wish would put an early access tag on them.
Well, so many AAA games are basically early access.
Well,
but.
one game specifically that would have gotten rid of so much hate if they would have put early access on it. No Man's Sky.
Yeah.
They would have gotten away with so much more.
It didn't help that he blatantly said things were going to be in the game that weren't for years.
And they are now, but again, you put early access on that and people... Heck, Fortnite probably would have kept early access on their thing for forever, if not for the fact of, I guess, they just finally released what they considered early access. And even then, it's they had been a full-fledged game for a very long time.
They were taking all kinds of money. It's I think it was still the first 3 seasons. It was early access.
At least. Yep. Which, for reference, Craftopia has 346 people playing it right now.
It's more than Redfall.
Yep.
We'll get them next time.
Redfall. And then another 4,000, and then another 4,000 people have jumped into Palworld since we have talked. So yeah Craftopia is dead.
Oh yeah.
They are on to Palworld.
It was just an observation I saw on Steam that they had this other game. I didn't even know they did have another game, and it was still in early access. So
I guess the other question would be, is what is Microsoft's contract with this? Because it is on Game Pass. Obviously, we don't see the ramifications of how it's doing. It's apparently doing fantastic on Game Pass, which I would imagine. So that's a huge extra. That's another extra boon, because the only numbers that we've been talking about have been the Steam numbers.
Yeah, the Steam numbers.
That's pretty crazy. Then it's selling so much when it's on Game Pass.
Yeah. Well, and it's on PC Game Pass too, so it's not just
what the heck?
Xbox. Yeah. So it's like these numbers are probably. I mean, guess another 200,000 at least.
I'd probably put another million on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
at least on PC.
Yeah, there's at least
close
15 million Game Pass subscribers or something like that. Maybe more, maybe in the 20 millions.
Word of mouth, and we all know word of mouth, especially if you have Game Pass, you immediately go, hey, I got to go down. I did that. As soon as I knew it was on Game Pass, I'm going to go download that.
Well, now that, PlayStation has seen Palworld's success, they're trying to get they want Palworld on PlayStation now.
Shuhei Yoshida is already working his magic.
Yeah, we'll see if his magic works, because I just wonder if Microsoft will let them. In terms of, hey, we'll give you a whole lot more money to keep this on Game Pass.
The question would be is how busy are they with some other different things that they're having to deal with to deal with all of this other stuff. I agree. You should throw the bag at them on this, but well,
I guess part of it too is how much is it benefiting them? We just, it's selling a bajillion units somehow outside of Game Pass. So is Game Pass somehow not a draw to get people into Palworld, or what's the deal with that? Because that just seems so strange that people are outright buying it.
Well, it's Steam. There's people who don't have Xboxes who are just buying it on PC.
Yeah, there are a lot of Steam users out there.
I guess I don't know. It just seems like such an overwhelmingly large number. That people wouldn't. I don't know. It just seems strange to me that people wouldn't just buy a $10 sub for this, something like this, especially. But
it is inferior.
Some people they're just like, well, let's just buy it. It's $30.
Well, that and mouse and keyboard. A lot of people just want to use mouse and keyboard. They don't want to use a controller. Now, obviously, Xbox can support mouse and keyboard, but that doesn't mean Palworld is set up that way for Xbox yet. I don't know. It's a different iteration of Palworld at this point.
I guess the other thing you'd look at is I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of these Steam sales are in the Asian territories, and there aren't a lot of Xboxes there. So
no, that's a good point.
There are probably a ton of people that have bought
is this out in China?
Yep, believe so.
Okay. Well, that might be 6 million right there.
Yep. And again, they had the launch and it was only $27. So I mean, that's easy. It's easy to make that purchase and just be like, I'm just going to buy this.
Well, that's a whole. I mean, this is a separate conversation, but I've been feeling lately when I look at stuff, aren't indie games and all that stuff really expensive these days? We have later on the doc of it, we're talking about Xbox Arcade. I mean, games are so much more expensive now. 27 is not easy for me, but
those budgets, man. The
games are just so much more expensive. I think it was last year or the year before, I was seeing discussion from indie developers about the struggle of indie development at this point and the rising costs of game development, even for indies, which is why the prices keep going up. But people still want their $10 indie game, but now they're $35. Yeah. So, I mean, licensing is more expensive. Obviously, Unity's doing all kinds of crazy crap. So, that kind of stuff impacts the developers, and they have to adjust their pricing for those things. Your Crywares and your Havoc and, all the physics and all that stuff. It's just more expensive.
All the things.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So Palworld doing its thing. We'll definitely keep an eye on this. This is not going away anytime
Weekly
soon.
Palworld updates.
Yeah. I don't think it'll hit like Fortnite level of crazy, but I think we'll be talking about it probably for the next 2 months at least.
Already hitting a much higher number than we would have thought, though. That's for sure.
Oh God, yeah. Never would have expected this.
It's so funny to see, like, every time I go on Twitter, like, not that I'm on it all the time, but every single time I'm on there, it's like Palworld sold another 1 million copies. It's like
Same.
Yeah.
All right, so this story happened last week, and I wanted to get into it, but we had to talk the Xbox Direct, which that was a fun conversation. But I still think this story is interesting. So Felipe Tremblay, who is the director of subscriptions at Ubisoft, was interviewed by GamesIndustry.biz. And the topic of the future of subscriptions came up on the heels of Ubisoft making changes to their subscription service. So that's what GamesIndustry.biz was getting into. And so this is part of what Felipe Tremblay said. I hope I'm saying his name right. I believe that's how you say it. But he said, one of the things we saw is that gamers are used to, a little bit like DVD, having and owning their games. That's the consumer shift that needs to happen, meaning the consumer shift, we need to get them from comfortable not owning their games. And I lost my spot. They get back to what he was saying. They got comfortable not owning their CD collection or DVD collection. That's a transformation that's been a bit slower to happen in games. So a lot of people picked up on this. And they were furious at the idea that Ubisoft is just so blatantly suggesting owning games is the problem and we need to be comfortable not owning them. So when I was looking at it, though, I got the sense that that's not exactly what he was trying to say. And I wonder if it's like he's French and he doesn't like know how to say what he actually wants to say in English. I don't know. But I feel like he was making the distinction between digital ownership and physical ownership. And I think that because you don't own your physical games, either, technically you don't own your physical games. All they have to do is cut the license and you can't play the game anymore. So it doesn't matter that you own the disc. David, what do you think?
It depends on what's on the disc.
Sure.
Because if you actually put your game on the disc, you can still play it offline. But I agree with you. I get the feeling he's not saying you need to get comfortable not owning a game. No, he's just trying to say, look, there's subscriptions are a thing, and it took a while for people to be willing to, pay $10 a month to listen to their music. It took a while for people to get used to paying, for subscription services to watch their movies and TV shows and stuff. There's a point that we'll have to get to where people will be comfortable with, okay, this is how I'm ingesting my video games.
Yeah, that's
we're still at that point. Yeah, we're still at that point. And I mean, I guess it's different, like, because now ownership is kind of coming back to a degree because you got vinyl becoming a thing again. Which I think is
that feels
fantastic.
Like collection.
I love vinyl.
Yeah.
So
sure.
maybe video games will find a way to do that, but I doubt it because, vinyls, you can actually listen to your music off of a vinyl and it's just a couple minutes compared to obviously hours of video games. You're not going to be able to ingest it the same way.
But it's not like music physical, CDs and all that has completely gone away yet.
Yeah.
We're not at that place. I can go. Yeah. Obviously, we saw the story about Best Buy like getting rid of video games. And
well, you and I went in
stuff.
at Best Buy and like it was pretty sad, the whole section.
Yeah, it was very small.
But it's just that point. Like I think we're finally getting to the threshold where that's a possibility because we have never been at this point, and then COVID happened. And then all kinds of people started, that was the easy way to do things, was to digitally purchase their games. People got used to that. And now we're at that threshold moment of, okay, we're kind of in that stepping stone of it becoming, if anything, digital numbers that we've looked at and seen are extremely high, higher than they've ever been when it comes to pre-order. Like I worked at GameStop for quite a few years. I remember doing the Black Ops 2 midnight release and selling over 600 copies in a random town that was on the outside of bigger town. Like, that's a ridiculous. But now when I went to the midnight release for God of War, there were maybe 20 copies, 20, 30 copies at best that got sold for a humongous game. And we know that sold, what was it, like 3 million in a week or something like that. It was a really big number. So you look at things like that and it's just, we're at that threshold. It's just that we're still teetering on, the people are still getting that comfort level. Like, I'll be honest, I always thought I would always have physical video games. And now becoming a part of the media, I'll be honest, I've been looking at Infinite Wealth. I'm having a little bit of FOMO, but I'm not thinking of buying a physical copy. I'm looking at digital and how I can maneuver money to have the currency to buy a digital copy. And if I should, because there's so many other games coming out, I'm not looking at it. I'm looking at it from the ease of purchase standpoint and the ease of the collection, because of all these devices I have that I can play things. I mean, if I buy it on PC, I can play it on my Steam Deck, like all these different things. It's just, I never thought I would get there. So I get why he's saying it, because I reached a level where I was just comfortable as a reviewer of, okay, my stuff is digital. I'd rather get the copy, for nothing. And it made it easier for me to look at, if I see something, I'll look on sale and see if somebody has it digitally.
Yeah, but the difference between games, music, TV, all that stuff, games are just so freaking big, and they take up so much download,
big in terms of data, and also I think big in terms of just time you spend playing them. It's not the same as like a subscription like Spotify, where you listen to songs in like quick succession, or even Netflix, where you're spending an hour watching a movie or something. Like, David wants to play Infinite Wealth. That's like a 70-hour commitment.
I guess there's more of a, which to what Jack is somewhat alluding, there is more of a connection there that exists in,
well, like even just like in terms of subscriptions, like this is, I'm just gonna get into it now. So like, do I think the director of subscriptions wants people to not be comfortable, or to be comfortable not owning games, and that he means that? Yes, because that's his job. And that's the goal of game companies for the past decade, is to get people to not actually own their games so they have more control.
Right.
You can go back, like, remember, like even like a decade ago, PS3 days, where all these companies are saying, oh, used games are killing our businesses. You got to have online passes in all of our games. You have to like verify that you bought a new copy. I mean, all this stuff has been a long game of like, and not to say that obviously there's benefits to digital purchases, but like the end goal for so many of these companies has been to get rid of physical games, because they lose money on that. And they have an incentive to wipe out physical games. So I think the director of subscriptions at Ubisoft absolutely wants to eradicate game ownership, because that's what they're aiming for.
I do agree with that.
And I mean, Xbox One, they tried
that was the most blatant version of that. When you read the entire context, though, of what Felipe was saying, it just didn't feel like the idea of like, we're just trying to like that particular conversation did not feel quite that. Yes, we are absolutely trying to reduce ownership in video. You're
right, but that's what he can say nice stuff all he wants, but that's his job.
But I think there still is the point. Like, in order for any subscription service to take off, there does have to be a comfortability with digital, with being okay with not inserting your disc into a 6-disc CD changer that hardly works anymore and you can't repair it. So it was kind of the same thing for me with David. I mean, I got used to it simply because I worked in media, literally 2012, 2014, I'm doing reviews, and all but 3 games I reviewed were digital. And so I just kind of had to get used to it. And now almost all my games are digital. I think the only physical copies I've bought recently was Mario Wonder and Street Fighter 6. Those are the only 2 physical games I bought last year. And in 2022, I don't remember if I did. No, Splatoon 3. I did get that physical. So, but that was 1. So everything else, digital or subscription or like GameFly, like I'm not buying in that way anymore. So I think the difference
I think we do have a weird perspective on it too. Like, cause I was doing writing for like Silicon Era around that same time that you were doing stuff, Anthony.
Yeah.
And yeah, it used to be where I was right in that transition point where most of them was physical to slowly shifting to digital. Like, I think the last thing I did for Silicon Era that was still physical, it was like Neo, and that was like the beginning of 2017.
Oh yeah.
And so Sony was still doing physical stuff up until then, but a lot of it was switching to digital, especially for those smaller companies. And now these days everything's digital. But
everything,
I mean, so
but yeah, that's not the normal consumer experience,
right?
So,
no, because I mean, physical sales are still over half of the amount of sales that happen. And I mean, personally, when I buy physical, I guess it depends on the game, right? Like something like Street Fighter, I wouldn't get physical just because I know it's going to have a million updates and it's going to have a bunch of different characters, and so it's kind of not really worth that.
If it's live service, there's not a reason to buy it physical.
Right,
Let's
absolutely.
put it out that way, yep.
Yeah, but there's
I got it for $14. I couldn't pass it up.
Right. But a lot of games though, like if it's, if I'm not reviewing it, I'm just going to buy it. I want to get the physical just so I have that insurance. Because I've had a situation before where like I had like some kind of problem with my Switch account, and so I lost access to my Smash Bros. Game. And so, then I eventually bought a physical copy of Smash Bros. Just so I could have it, because it's like, this is so annoying. I just don't, and that's, it's so convenient to have all this digital stuff, and it's great when it works. But the one time it doesn't work, it's like, oh my gosh, what?
I had a similar situation.
It doesn't help when it's Nintendo either, because Nintendo's online stuff is awful. And Nintendo's also one of the few companies that actually when you buy the card, it's on the card for the most part.
For the most part.
Yeah.
No, I got a story about Nintendo's nightmares. I got the OLED, and I transferred everything from my old Switch to the OLED.
Did that actually work for you? Because it didn't work for me. I had to do it I had to do all my manual account stuff, because whatever reason I put them like right next to each other to do transferring. It didn't work.
Oh really? Yeah,
mine
worked wonderfully. What the problem was, I thought I made my OLED my home Switch, and I guess I didn't. So I got I'm sorry. I did get Mario Wonder digitally. I got it from GameFly, but then it said I bought it. I was like, I need this. So either way, I got on a plane, ready to play Mario Wonder. I get on, and it does a license check, and I'm like, what the frick? Like, why are you license checking this? Like, what is going on? Apparently, I didn't make my Switch OLED my home Switch, so I went that flight, without being able to play any of my games on.
That's tragic.
Yeah, so they're that part of the problem with digital ownership, stuff like that. You get those license checks, and then you're screwed for a flight. I fixed it, everything's fine, but it was very, very annoying. I was like, yo. So yeah, the downfall of digital, not the downfall, but the downsides of digital, they're there. But in terms of it's absurd.
And it's complicated because it's not like physical is perfect either, right? Like eventually those discs degrade and stop working. Like
you could lose it, you could break it, you could, yeah.
Well, I had a thing recently, like some 3DS games are actually like dying already.
Yeah.
Like the Persona Q, like I actually tried to play that, like, was it like 3 or 4 months ago? It doesn't work anymore.
Wow.
And it's like, what the heck?
Yeah, my Pokemon Crystal from the Game Boy Color still works. I just
I think like Pokemon Red still works, just the save thing doesn't work anymore. But it's like, so it's like some of the stuff will eventually degrade and not work anymore. I mean, the true way to save all your games is to like pirate it, really. But
it is. It absolutely upload the ROM yourself.
Yeah.
Well, somebody actually said if you can't own it, are you really pirating it? If nobody can own it,
it's a good question. Actually, it's a very good question. To be fair, I get hey, you know, if we gonna get all legal about this, then you know, like, yeah, it's at least a good question. We know the answer, but it's a good question. So, yeah, I think subscription services, you know, Spotify is fine. Apple Music is doing its thing. Obviously, Netflix and others struggling a little bit, but they'll find their way. They will find the Disney Plus will find its way. I think the same thing will happen with video games. You know, it will find its way. It will have its audience and people. I think the biggest hurdle for subscriptions at this point isn't necessarily getting people to feel comfortable not owning their games, but more so can people's internet like take it, you know, long term in terms of downloading and things like that.
Well, I feel like part of it too is just the focus on using subscription services as like your main business model doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. Like it should be a supplementary thing where, I mean, not dissimilar to how Nintendo does it, where like you're doing access to all their old games, and that's a subscription that makes sense to me. Because otherwise, what the problem with the Game Pass model to me is like you're just dumping millions of dollars into all these super huge AAA games, and then you're not making like most of the money back in a clean way. Like where you know, Sony releases Spider-Man 2, they sell 10 million copies, they get their money back. Microsoft releases Starfield, and do they get their money back? I mean, do the Game Pass subscribers neatly translate to covering the money that you would lose in Spider-Man? Yeah. I don't know if you guys are allowed to talk about this, but there's some like information those Sony leaks recently where Sony tried to experiment with the Horizon, putting that on their, you know, PlayStation Plus subscription, and they estimated they lost like millions of dollars by doing that, even though the game had been out for months. And it's like,
yeah, because it was a year later. Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's like, you know, it doesn't make sense to me as a primary business model. It makes sense to me as a supplement to like have your backlog and category to kind of like, you know, be like, this is something that we do on the side. This is something that brings in some income. But if you do it as your main business model, it just seems so messed up, because especially when you're talking about subscription services, you're paying on a monthly fee. You know, it's just not the same as a Netflix where you're spending an hour, you know, maybe a night watching a few movies. Well, you're spending like potentially a month on one game. Is that really the same? I don't know. It seems like the time commitment is so different from movies or music.
Yeah, I think the time commitment is different, but I've justified, like I subscribe to Gamefly, for example. I love Gamefly, and my justification is I get to play one new game a month for less than $60 or $70 at this point. Like that, and I feel good about that. Like I can rent Infinite Wealth, and I paid $18 for the month to knock out Infinite Wealth. Now, whether I do or not, that's on me, but like, that's the purpose, right? Like I feel good about, I pay $18 a month, whatever, and I get to play this one game for the month. And
well, so let's say you get Infinite Wealth, but then you don't finish it. Do you feel good about that? Like, let's say your month's up, you didn't have enough time to
doing this podcast, not all the time. But if I wasn't doing this podcast and I was like that was literally like just casually just playing games and renting games from game. Yeah, I wouldn't be fine. I would be fine with that because I know it's a long game. I'm still getting my money's worth because I didn't pay $70 for it. At that point, I've paid $30-something. Okay, I'm good with that. At some point, I'm going to finish it and send it back, get a brand new game from this year. I like playing the current stuff and being in the conversation, and I don't have to spend $70 a month, you know. So I imagine people with Game Pass kind of might justify it that way themselves as well.
Yeah, I guess it kind of depends on the game too, because I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I rented games all the time when I was a kid. You know, you go to like Hollywood Video or Blockbuster,
yeah.
But I always hated renting RPGs or something because you're just not going to finish them, right? Like I'll rent like Beautiful
Joe. But that was different because you had to return it. You know, like by a certain time. So yeah, that felt bad for sure. Yeah. Modern subscription services, you don't have to return it. So, you know, what you get what you want out of the money that you're spending. But I feel like that's the difference between Netflix. Like Netflix it is their main model, and obviously both of them have the same goal. We need to retain subs to continue to get the recurring revenue. But we also need to do things that gather new subscriptions, whether it's the thing just for the month, like a Starfield comes out and you subscribe just for that month or 2 months or whatever, and then you're off, and then maybe something else comes out. They know like that's kind of the ebb and flow. Netflix wasn't profitable for a long time. So I think that's just kind of the hit that you have to take for a little while until you figure out what is it going to take to get more people more often to stay and to sub even for a month. I think Netflix has largely figured that out. Obviously, they've made some missteps because original content was more expensive than they anticipated.
Well, that's kind of a similar thing with the video games, though, right?
Yeah,
like the original content, the Starfields and the Hellblades, those cost like $1 bajillion.
Yeah.
That's kind of what you're selling the service on. That's where I feel like it's kind of a mistake to do it that way, where it should the service should be to supplement rather than like putting all your eggs in your one basket that way. It's where it's dangerous. That's where it becomes dangerous, I think.
Well, and that's why we're starting to hear things about potential games coming to other platforms.
Right, because they got to make money.
Which, interestingly enough, Hi-Fi Rush got DualSense compatibility on.
Well, and they had a PS4 version before Microsoft bought them, and they said you got to cancel that now.
But it's like there's actual DualSense controller compatibility on Steam right now, and we're talking like not only the icons but the trigger, trigger stuff, like the haptics and stuff. So it's like, is this a prep?
This is the stuff that they have to figure out. These are the hits that they have to take for now until it either works or it doesn't. So, I mean, lots of businesses take hits, on new things. The advantage Xbox has with Game Pass is that they're the only service that's doing it at this scale.
And they're owned by Microsoft, so they have so much money.
Right. So that's kind of their advantage in taking this kind of risk and making it their main thing. But it'll be interesting. Okay, so I think, Jack, do you like multiplayer games?
Sometimes. I mean, these days I mostly play fighting games, but I used to be like into Halo and stuff.
Okay. So generally we like multiplayer games here. Yeah. So I'm curious to know what y'all think about this. So CD Projekt Red said that they're going for a Cyberpunk 2077 sequel, but this time they want to add multiplayer. David, you played Cyberpunk 2077, right?
Not a ton of it, but I have played Cyberpunk. I played enough of it to have a good feel for the game. Okay.
Would you want a multiplayer game in Cyberpunk 2077?
I think it's got a really cool world for it, but I don't know that I'd want a 6v6 or battle royale style game. Like, if you have something multiplayer, to me, it should be something that functions more as co-op. Like, I think that utilizes the world better, because then you can kind of design story elements for it and whatnot. Like, I think the world could work for something, but I mean, I just don't want us to have just another deathmatch game, like, kind of thing.
Yeah, what'd you say, Jack?
The Ghost of Tsushima one's a cool model to follow, I thought.
Legends.
Oh, that has multiplayer?
Yeah, they added one, and it's like this whole involved co-op thing where it works off of like the base of the normal game, but it's like a multiplayer thing, yeah. And I actually did play that with a friend where we did the whole thing, like got all the achievements and stuff, but that was actually fun. And like David said, it kind of built on the world, and it was clever. It felt like a good expansion of the game rather than just 6v6 deathmatch. I don't think, because remember like when they did all that kind of stuff for like BioShock 2 and
it was like every game would have a multiplayer or something.
Whether it made any sense or not, they had it.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I assume that
God of War had a multiplayer deathmatch. Like, what a time.
Yeah,
I if they do something clever, I think they could make it work. But
I just don't want forced multiplayer. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that. Yeah, I think CD Projekt Red, they're thoughtful about what they do, so I know they're not just throwing something at the wall and be like, yeah, we're gonna add multiplayer because it's money. But I feel like it would be like factions in The Last of Us, like it's there and it was good, but it's not the main thing. It's like it's there if you want it. But I just wonder also, it's not what people are there for. Like, people don't play Cyberpunk 2077 at this point because we've established what Cyberpunk 2077 is without multiplayer. So I think that's just what people are good with. And so to add it, I feel like it would be like The Last of Us audience, where there was a multiplayer, it was good, but it wasn't the main thing. So it mostly is left out of everything else because that's not what people play The Last of Us for. But I also don't hear people wishing that Cyberpunk 2077 had a multiplayer. So it is kind of like, where is this coming from?
It's one of those weird like clickbait things I've noticed is you can like search popular games and then like say multiplayer, and there's like a billion YouTube videos of like, what if this game had multiplayer? And it's like, why does everyone want multiplayer? But people want it. So
I actually think the original Cyberpunk 2077 plan was actually to have multiplayer in an expansion.
I think you're right. Yeah,
it was actually part of the original 2077 plan.
Yeah, I think you are right about that. Yeah.
Then they canned it, and I guess they might be looking at it as part of the sequel since they've got things figured out. So
okay,
it's a thoughtful multiplayer is fine.
It's totally random. Remember, like Final Fantasy 15 had multiplayer.
This is the most random stuff. Would just have multiplayer, and I remember the conversation. Why does this have multiplayer? I don't know. That's that. Well, at the time, a lot of developers were looking at like, well, how do we keep people playing our game? Not a multiplayer. Okay.
And Final Fantasy 15 is like a game where they're like, we're going to try literally everything we have.
All right. I remember when I woke up in the morning to the announcement that Microsoft was buying Activision Blizzard. Like, I vividly, it was, where were you when this happened kind of
9/11.
Thing. Yeah. Okay.
Well, this video is demonetized.
Sorry.
This morning, I woke up to Microsoft laying off 1,900 employees in the video game space. This is pretty bad. So, I forget how to say his name. Rami Ismail,
I think.
Ismail, the co-founder of Lambier. He calculated that in 25 days of 2024, we've reached half the number of layoffs from 2023. So, I mean, yeah, this is rough. This is rough.
So how bad is it, like the change in optics? Like last week, we're talking developer direct. We're excited. Xbox has done some good things. We're looking forward to some new games. And ironically, it's a developer direct.
Yeah.
And then this week,
yeah, I see it.
Almost 2,000 of those developers are now gone.
Yeah.
Because these are just the game side. This is not Microsoft. This is this side. And it's pretty all encompassing. I was looking at
do you know the different roles and stuff that were
Activision? I've got actually one specific number that I wanted to point out. They also canceled the survival game Odyssey from Blizzard. That was the new survival game that they had announced. It sounded cool. The concept art looked cool. They'd apparently been working on this, I think, for like 6 years.
Ooh.
I read that Tom Henderson said it was because of engine troubles, because they were using a different game engine. Was part of the reason that they did this. But that genre is suddenly booming with a certain game we talked about at the start of this podcast. So, you're getting rid of a possible money maker, even though you'd probably be investing a lot into it because Blizzard is notorious for being slow with putting stuff out.
Yeah.
That entire team was laid off. 40% of Toys for Bob is gone.
Oh, wow.
And 30% of Sledgehammer Games is gone. The people who are literally working on the current Modern
both Toys for
3.
Bob and Call It or Sledgehammer, yeah.
Yep. And there are impacts from Infinity Ward and Treyarch. It's probably not as big, and that's because both of them are still working on whatever the next thing is for Call of Duty. But those people are gone. The rumor, let me see, Jez Corden from Windows Central, he said, let me see, there was one specific thing, there's a couple specific things he made. Multiple sources told him that Microsoft was laying off the entire internal customer support teams for Activision Blizzard. Like literally the entire ones, that they're going to outsource it. Which one of the things people said was Activision Blizzard, they were one of the few game publishers that had high quality internal customer support. Now they're all gone. And then the other thing, this kind of works with our conversation from earlier. Supposedly, they are getting rid of the entire physical retail teams. Obviously, they could still outsource, but that would be kind of run with the whole idea of physical games. That supposedly this is what it said. Microsoft's also shut down departments dedicated to bringing Xbox games to physical retail.
So they can be adorably all digital.
Yep. So I forget that they used that stupid word on that slide. But this is obviously just like you said, it's kind of shell-shocked. Like, that's an easy way to put it, because people were messaging Jason Schreier to find out if he knew that they were fired or not.
Wow.
That's how bad this was.
Wow.
Schreier was saying that there are people who were talking to him 3 months ago that were all excited about this merger that were suddenly panicked talking to him.
Yeah,
like,
that's
why would you be excited about the merger? This is what happens when that happens.
I know.
Something that really frustrates me is I'm seeing
the thing about the mergers is there will be layoffs.
Well, and there will, but what really frustrates me here is there's a lot of people who are throwing it under the guise of redundancy, and I'm sure that there is some redundancy because that just makes sense. It's two publishers that are merging. There's going to be some redundant positions,
right?
1900.
To be honest, I thought that Activision was huge.
Still could
Blizzard
be some redundancy.
Huge. Sure.
But you're talking about an entire canceled game project and then multiple studios with huge layoffs. Overwatch 2, multiple. There's a bunch of developers actually that I was reading with Overwatch 2. What was it? Who was it? George Murillo. He said he was the. Let me pull up who he specifically was. He was the senior designer for Overwatch 2.
Wow.
He was laid off, and he said just got laid off with basically my entire team.
Wow. Yeah. So I was under the impression that I would probably say most, 51% and up, were redundancies, because it made sense. A huge publisher merging with another huge companies, there's probably going to be a lot of crossover. It just happened to be, I didn't think all 1900, but I thought most. To know that it's probably less than, not even most, but a less than that's disturbing. I've been laid off before, and it was because of budget cuts, and I was out of work for 8 months and fell into a depression and all that. Like, you just don't know when the next job will come. I'm a hireable person, that dread of is it gonna be me? Is it gonna? Oh shoot! My 3 other friends just got laid off. Frick. Well, I'm not laid off today. Will I make it tomorrow? It's a horrible, horrible feeling. And then when you get it, you're in a phase, you're in a daze. What's next? What am I going to do for my family? All that kind of stuff. It's awful. It makes me wonder. I mean, one of those things that's if this is going to happen, whether it's the economy or a merger, like, does games really need to be like this big of business? Like, my goodness.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, we didn't even get into the fact Mike Ibarra, the CEO of Blizzard, he's
basically
gone.
Quit. Yeah.
And he literally had said 3 months ago, according to Matt Booty, that they were going to have to drag him out.
What do you mean by drag him out?
I will get you the quote. He said, let me find it real fast.
Like, they want him to go and they're going to drag him out? Like,
it was, no, this is literally what, trying to find what, so this is what was said, by Jason Schreier. He said, Microsoft's Matt Booty said in a note that Ibarra chose to leave his position as president of Blizzard. But in November at BlizzCon, Ibarra told me, I'm assuming he's saying that he's talking to Jason Schreier. He said that he wanted to stay for the long haul. Someone will drag me out of Blizzard, Ibarra told me. That's how long I will be here.
Oh, okay.
So he was pretty much forced to leave. He left, and then Alan Adham, the chief design officer and the company's founder of Blizzard, left. Like, that's just massive. Like, we talk about
strange days. Yeah.
We keep talking about all these different things with management and all these other kind of things, and they're losing the managers, like the people who should be. And the only thing I will say that I heard from somebody is that maybe Ibarra and Spencer didn't get along very well. Certain people, and that was part of why he left Xbox.
I can imagine that.
So, I don't know the behind the scenes things, obviously, or whatnot, but just, man, this is awful. Like, the whole situation is awful.
Yeah, it's the unfortunate part of video games being big business. Like, I'm not naive to business.
Oh, yeah.
Like, as one who manages a business, like, I haven't had to lay anybody off or anything like that. But, business decisions need to be made. And sometimes, yes, it is based on profit. Sometimes it is based on, factors that, people who don't run businesses don't really like to talk about and accept. But with this kind of thing, yes, a merger and acquisition, there's always going to be layoffs. That's just how it goes, unfortunately. But at the same time, this is the consequence of going big business. It's like, it's the unfortunate part of something that's artful and entertainment. And the same thing with movies, same thing with TV. This is what happens when you go big. It's unfortunate, and it is kind of like get into this industry at your own risk kind of feeling, which is unfortunate. It's not like maybe management can stay at a game development job for 30 years, but this is not one of those careers where it seems like you can stay at one company doing one thing for 25, 30, 40 plus years.
It's never been that way really either, at least in the West. I mean, Japanese companies is different, but in the West, it's always kind of been like you're on a team, you make a game. Sometimes you get to stick around for the next one. Sometimes you don't. And it's kind of been that way the whole time. But I mean, obviously the layoffs are unfortunate, and it's just, I hate how they treat people. Like, they don't even tell them that they're going to be laid off. And it's just, I hate that stuff. But
that's an awful feeling.
You literally have to sit by your inbox worried. Yeah. Like, that's literally, yeah.
No, I think, though, unfortunately, I don't think this is the end of it. I mean, I think we're kind of at the precipice of the industry changing in pretty big ways. Everyone's kind of tightening their belt anyway. And I think part of the reason all these companies are so obsessed with the AI stuff is they're like, we're not going to have these people going forward, the same amount of people that we hired like during COVID and all that kind of stuff. So how can we try to like minimize the damage? And I think the AI is going to cause its own damage, but we're going to be in some weird transition years where we're going to look back on this and we're going to see like a weird crop of games, I think, that come out of these circumstances.
Well, one of the things that was at least kind of brought up was just the thought that, Microsoft, they love contract workers. You're going to have a lot of contract workers on some of these games because, that's going to be the way that they keep this Call of Duty train running. Because, somebody we were having a discussion in a chat, and it was like, well, there's no way they keep Call of Duty yearly. I'm like, you have to, because that's what's bringing in the money, because that's what's going to keep people employed in general, because that makes the most money for Activision Blizzard right now. So you have to keep that.
Warzone hasn't surpassed it yet.
Well, I mean, Warzone I count as a part of it. Like,
okay, that's fair.
Because there were layoffs at Raven as well, from some of their people. But it becomes, you hire contract workers, you keep them until it's time to renew and bring them on full and give them benefits and stuff, and then you let those people go and bring on the next crop, and before you know it, half of these games have no soul because there's not people on them that actually give a crap about them. They're more just, again, contract workers. I'm not saying contract workers can't be a part of a team.
No, but
contract workers do great work.
But when you're constantly having to reintegrate someone, you lose something.
Well, I think especially for these big projects too, when you're contracting out, I mean, it's usually for like really minor stuff like textures or like building up certain things. It's like, I just can't imagine a lot of these people are even doing work that they can be passionate about, right? In some circumstances. And
I wouldn't say all contract work is minor.
No, and I didn't say all contract work, but I think a lot of the stuff when you're doing like these very minor tasks, it's like, you know, it's hard. It's work that's difficult to be.
It becomes almost a production factory kind of style job. It's do your thing and get out.
I think it depends on what it is and what you do. I mean, if your thing is, you know, designing trees for environments, then you know, like wherever you're designing those trees. You know, I know somebody who I won't name the developer, but they just do like lighting for stadiums and, you know, like lighting for different video games and stuff. And, you know, they still work at the same company, but you know, if that's what they do, then, you know, it's not a minuscule thing. It's it's just something you do somewhere else. It depends
on the thing, right? Because there's like 10 million jobs like that where it's not necessarily. Because I guess the way I think about it, like even 20 years ago, the way game development worked, it was like, you know, 20, 30 people, and people weren't just working on one thing. They were hopping around doing all kinds of different stuff. Like there's actually some really great like podcasts of like the Ratchet and Clank developers, like at Insomniac, where they're talking about their whole process of how they made the games. And it's like, people were just in charge of entire levels, like all the graphics, all the level design, all that stuff.
And so you see it in the game. Like that's the thing, is you see it in the game, the passion that's behind it.
So like game development used to be like a very highly, you know, very technical, but also very highly involved creative mark that everyone could kind of leave on it. And I feel like it's different these days, and where you're like having a million different tasks where, maybe you're working on this one tree, maybe you're working on like this one, you know, one other rock or whatever. It gets harder and harder, I think, for people to leave their personal touch in games.
Well, that's where you see studios like, for instance, Obsidian, Insomniac, honestly, a lot of the PlayStation studios. I'm not saying that they're the only ones or whatnot in saying it, but you have a lot of this internal studio like competitions, like that. Naughty Dog wants to one up Santa Monica. Like you have this camaraderie that's there, and these people are putting. There's a reason that it's not necessarily the best culture, but the reason the crunch culture is in those is because they're always trying their hardest to one up each other. It's not always because they have to meet a deadline. It's because they're trying to one up the other guy.
Well, they're trying because they're passionate about their work.
If you're going to put in 44 hours, I'm going to put in 45.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just like you said, it's hard to look at right now, especially with all these different things, and you just worry because what's hitting next? Is this just again, we're already closing in on the number that we had last year, and last year we had so many great games come out, so at least that kind of, I don't want to say covered up the stench, but I'm sure you get what I mean in that of it at least we had great games.
Sure, yeah.
So what happens when we get to the middle of this year where there's not nearly the barrage and
well, and I always feel bad for these AAA developers too, where they're working on games for 6 to 7 years, and like some of them don't, like the Blizzard one, it just got canceled, where it's 6 years of development and now they've got nothing to show for it. That's 6 years of their lives gone. It's like, so I think it is I think the fact that all those games did release last year is great, because then people's work actually got out and people could appreciate it, and like their work was able to be like enjoyed.
It'll become something else, because this is a Blizzard thing, because Titan was canceled and Overwatch came out of it. So we'll see what comes out of Odyssey. They'll probably reuse assets.
Yeah. Well said, Jack. We hope all 1,900 of these developers land on their feet in some way. All right, we'll do one more. Jack brought it up earlier, so I want to go full circle and not skip this topic. IGN believes Xbox's Indie Selects program is reminiscent of Xbox Live Arcade. I don't know if you've seen the screenshot of it. I don't know. I don't even know if it's out yet. I haven't powered on my Xbox for a little while because I'm working on something.
You'll get an ad when you turn it on, by the way.
I did get. I wanted to talk about that, but that ad really didn't bother me that much, to be honest. But anyway, did you guys buy games from Xbox Live Arcade?
Dude,
oh yeah.
So I have a story actually with that. I didn't know about. I'd gotten an Xbox, played Halo on it. It was the 360 was my first Xbox. Had fun with different stuff on it and whatnot. I was still a PlayStation kid, but there was one point where I was a lot heavier Xbox, and I discovered Xbox Live Arcade. I had to go and buy a 120 gig hard drive, and I was constantly buying like the 1600 point cards like all the time, because I was buying like
the Heaven's Cloud opening.
Because I was buying like Sam and Max and like I'm trying to remember some of the different games like Castle Crashers, Shadow Complex. Love Shadow Complex.
Yeah,
I think I put Shadow Complex actually in my top platformers when we talked about it.
You did.
Like these games, and I'll be honest, I look at this and I'm like, guys, I appreciate you recognizing indies. This is not Xbox Live Arcade.
Yeah, like, I saw what they were doing. It's like, that's not, no.
It's a nice thing. This is a nice thing, but it's like Xbox Live Arcade these are games that are releasing on Xbox Live Arcade. Like,
right,
it is
kind of an event.
These games are only bought on your 360.
Yeah.
And this is the release date for this, and this is until you are like straight up almost making the content for this service, it's not arcade. Like they made that exciting, man. It was like,
that's true.
This is going to be a really silly comparison, I think. It was like Saturday morning cartoons. Like you got up, you were ready for it.
Well, they did these during the summer too.
There was that kind of excitement to it. Yeah, the summer of arcade.
Yeah,
like,
because that was when I was in high school. So it's like, oh man, this is like a real event.
But I went and looked at this. I'm like, wait, where's the like fanfare behind it? Like that's what is missing. It's more of a, hey, indies, yay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, when the guy does the EA Sports, it's in the game. That's what I expect out of
Sega.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I expect that, not this.
Yeah, I mean, there's no Marvel vs. Capcom 2 here, so it's
yeah,
true indie games. Yes. What really irked me though about Xbox Live Arcade was the Microsoft points. Like that was such a bad system. Oh my gosh.
I remember, like, dude, when you worked at GameStop, like you're in your head, like having to remember like what the different currency jumped around were.
I think it was like $15 or something. I don't even remember.
No, it was 800 points every $10. Every $10 was 800 points.
Yep.
Trust me, I remember because I had to do all the math for all the people who came into the store and needed to know how many Xbox Live points they needed.
And I didn't remember because it was so ethereal.
It was just
weird.
ridiculous. Like it was pointless.
Very carefully planning out my purchases because you get like the 1600 points or whatever, and I'm like
the $20. Yep.
This, and then this DLC, and that covers all the points.
Yep. Exactly. It was more just an annoyance, and it was back in the day of the getting people into your ecosystem idea, and that was essentially getting someone into your ecosystem.
I don't know what that did to get somebody into my ecosystem.
I'm not saying it was smart, Anthony.
No,
I'm not saying it was a good idea. I'm just saying somehow somebody thought it was.
If I pay
somebody thought
the money that it costs, then I'm still in your ecosystem.
Yeah. Somebody thought, oh, points. Let's make it a thing.
That was Xbox under Don Matrix. So I mean,
well, they all kind of did that, right? Because we had its points. Well, PlayStation was normal.
Kind of does it.
PlayStation was normal.
Yeah.
PlayStation was normal. Nintendo still kind of does it. Like your default is buy Nintendo points. You have to choose the option, pay the actual price.
Oh, okay, yeah. I guess I always pick that, so I kind of block that out.
At least the Wii points though were the actual dollar. Like it was like each Wii point was a cent.
Yeah,
like,
but
we're not talking like
unnecessary.
It's still not as unnecessary as literally changing the amount of currency.
Yeah.
Like $10 is 800 points. Like how does that even make sense?
No, yeah, I mean, it's a form of what free to play games do now with buying a currency and you got to overspend. Yeah,
COD points are the same. It's I guess COD points are still more in the Wii points thing of each one is a cent is essentially $1. So
yeah, I think most free to play games follow that where everything is a cent, but it's still weird that you even have to do that in the first place. So it's just maybe, but
it's even weirder though when
it feels like you're not spending money if you're spending gems. Like like hey, this is $15. Yeah. Maybe it feels better when you say this is 1,500 gems.
Maybe it just feels giftable or something. I don't know. But it's I
think
again
it's like the whole $1.99.
You're not thinking about it like money, so it's kind of more fun, I guess.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
But in any case, it's you also have the whole why don't you build up your balance so that you can go buy other things too. That was probably the other idea beyond just it showing dollars.
Yeah.
You felt like you had I have no idea. Like it is odd.
If they brought back Xbox Live Arcade, that would be fantastic. And
that
did
cool.
it the way you could Series X and S it, in terms of like visual aesthetics, but if it had this, I agree with you, David. Like if it had the same like fanfare and coolness of like, we got the indie games. Yeah. That would be fantastic.
Something though that's more weird though is like your choices here. Like the first graphic, indie games to wish list, like that are coming up. Lost Records, it's the Don't Nod game, the one that's the what is the name of that series? I can't even remember what it is now. Strange. It's not Life is Strange. Life is Strange.
Yeah. Okay,
that's just such a recognizable game that I don't think is actually an indie game because I'm pretty sure Don't Nod's all published by maybe even Focus Entertainment. So it's
I don't know who said it within Xbox, but they basically said like if it feels indie, like it could be added to the list.
I hate that.
Because Life is Strange just
feels is not the word they use, but you
Life is
understand
Strange
what I'm saying.
is AA. Like I would put that more as AA than indie.
Yeah, I agree.
Like Death's Door is indie.
Well, and like the arcade stuff wasn't necessarily indie. Like I said, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 was one of the summer games. I remember that.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just like the idea that you have a mix though, because it was like stuff like Castle Crashers.
I think it was also like dollar amounts too, like because obviously indie back then usually meant lesser price tag. It wasn't always that like you said the who's publishing, which is kind of why Dave the Diver ended up in the indie. Like it looked kind of indie and
got buzzed.
It looked like it, and it was under $20. Like it's exactly what I would look at as a Summer of Arcade game.
I agree. Yeah.
So like that's more what I'm looking at. Like you said, Castle Crashers, Shadow Complex, these games. Those are indie games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even the little XLA games that were coming out, by the little smaller, even really indie developers,
Yeah.
Those were fun too. All right. Well, that was fun.
Yep.
That'll do it for us tonight. A lot of topics left on the table, but we got more to talk about next week.
Oh, yeah. Always.
So, yeah. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We're gonna have some interesting discussion, I believe, next week because I get to talk about a game that I've been playing.
And just a heads up, I'll be able to talk about a game I've been playing, and that will delay our podcast release a little bit of next week's.
Yeah, you're right.
Not the one we're recording. Just a heads up to everybody listening. We'll be a little bit delayed just so that we can come in on an embargo.
Yep.
It'll be worth it though, because there's 2 games next week.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Assuming we all don't get laid off.
Oh man.
The layoffs are coming. Gaming trend layoffs.
Yeah, after I brought up 9/11.
We'll just
He said it again.
You guys
He's gonna get double laid off.
Whenever I bring it up, you gotta do the buzzer.
Yeah. We'll hopefully we'll survive this. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Might be the last time. Deuces.